But if it sinks, that your heart is way heavier, then immediately, like, you cease to exist. So the thing is that you could have made and survived and done all these things, and then you come up to the scale and then you get gobbled up.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Resurrectionist Podcast. This week, we are joined by Dr. Tiffany Bannworth. Dr. Bannworth has a master's in education and a doctorate in biblical archaeology. She is the founder of Bannworth Academy of Classical Education. She has more credentials than I could ever list out in an intro. Seriously, your LinkedIn is like insane to scroll through, but she does have experience in archaeology, paleontology. She has an educator. She does museum outreach and research as well. So welcome to the show, Dr. Bannworth.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
It's so exciting to have you. So we're going to be discussing ancient Egypt and ancient Egyptian funerary practices. But to start off with, what is a biblical archaeologist? Because I was completely unfamiliar with this term until I met you. Yeah, no, it's not something we have over here. So,
well, first I started out. I should denote. I originally started out as a forensic archaeologist, but locally, the colleges I was going to, I was actually going to go to the University of Chicago, but then my mom got sick when I first graduated, so I stayed here to be close to her. So I was going to do forensic archaeology, which I wanted to be an archaeologist that solved like ancient crime scenes. But then what happened is I kind of stood out in the class. So they were like trying to take me under their wing to teach me special projects and whatever. And they were really fine tuning me to like forensics with a specialty in archaeology as opposed to archaeology with a specialty in forensics. So I ended up taking like a lot of police classes and stuff like that, because by definition over here, forensic archaeology is in the police sense is anybody that's been left to the elements for more than 3 months. And so it was more of like not what I was looking to do. I mean, I'm sure the skills are transferable. So I ended up thinking, I transferred over to biblical archaeology, which essentially is archaeology of the Levant, as most of the time not only laid out by special events or items and artifacts that you might consider being in the Bible or supported by the Bible, but also um, co coexisting civilizations like Mesopotamia's and stuff like that were happening at the same time, and how they interrelate and intersect. So I originally was doing forensic archaeology with a focus in Mesopotamia and Egypt. And then I ended up getting my doctorate, because I have 2 doctorates, but I got one of my doctorates in specifically archaeology of the Bible. So I have a focus. My focused points are based around Moses, is why I wrote my doctorate, or part of my doctorate on.
Yes, so I wanted you on today to talk a little bit about Egyptian funerary practices as well, because it's one of those things I feel like everyone's a little familiar with, like mummies and pyramids, but I feel like the details of it exactly, maybe people don't fully understand. So could you maybe give us a little introduction into like what an Egyptian funeral would have looked like? Like, what was the process of it all?
Well, as soon as somebody died, the Anubis was present with them immediately. So this also goes to say is that I actually believe, and I said this to you off air, that there is power in actual Egypt. I don't believe it was a bunch of stories and that we're just talking nonsense talk here. And just to parallel it, as you said, how does it tie into biblical archaeology? When you look to the story of Moses, when Moses went to the Pharaoh and said, hey, release the Israelites, and he brought Aaron, they turned their staffs into snakes, and the magi of the court of Egypt also could turn their staffs into snakes. And then Aaron's snake went and gobbled up their snakes, and then they took the snake by the tail. And not only that, but then each of the plagues were a specific punishment to each of the certain gods that he wished to punish. And you could see the first maybe two or three of the miracles the Egyptians could keep up with. They could produce that type of magic, and then but they couldn't undo what had been done by the hand of God. So just leaning into this, even as a Christian, even as a biblical archaeologist, I believe that there is actual power in the Egyptian, stuff. So there's a disclaimer. So, or maybe a claimer instead of a disclaimer. I'm doing the opposite. But so Anubis would appear the moment that you took your last breath, right? So the idea is that if somebody had, because this wasn't, not everybody was being embalmed, especially the older kingdom that you're in. It was basically the royals, and then the middle kingdom was like the elites, and then it kind of trickled down, and then it kind of differentiated and scattered when you got to the like the Ptolemaic period. But the idea is that you would be taken to an epet, um, and they would wash the body, they would fumigate the body, they would rub it with the like natron, and they would make sure everything on the outside would get rid of essentially all the bacteria. So you can almost kind of compare that to when you go into surgery, where they on the wounds they're going to put like iodine on it to make it to where they can cut in the skin. So they basically do that first. And then they do what they call the evisceration process, which they get rid of all the viscera, which is the internal organs and stuff like that. And it's not necessarily that they get rid of it. It's that, number one, first of all, they have a different philosophy about where the thought processes come from. So now we would say you think with your brain, whereas then they would say that the center of thought and concept is your heart. So, and then even in the Bible, it talks about it kind of almost being in the bowels, because when you're like nervous and stuff, you get like the bubble guts, and stuff like that. And so the idea, but there is some in the Bible does talk about the heart as well, but and the mind. But they thought essentially the brain was like, I don't know, keeping up loose space. And then we talked about how Lee Bayless said they also brushed in ancient Roman Britain, they used to brush teeth with grains too. So I guess they thought this was just a commodity that they were getting rid of. So they would take out the nose, through the nose, the brain. They would, obviously the gases and the blood and stuff like that was taken out. And then they would take certain organs like the heart was a separate thing, but they would take like the lungs, the liver, the stomach, the intestines, and they would put them in canopic jars sometimes, not always. The later you got into Egypt, it was more of like a conceptual idea that the canopic jars were there, because it was almost like you were making a thing to the four sons of Horus, because each of the canopic jars are protected by a different, like Duamutef and Horus and stuff like that, and Seti. But they would go through and they would take out the organs, they would do the evisceration, and then they would pack the body with natron and let it dry out for probably, depending on the body, really, 70 to 90 days, or whenever it looked like it was just about right. But that's when the real stuff started happening, is because then after they've basically prepared the actual body, they would start to prepare the body for the spiritual realm. So then they would put certain amulets or protection spells, or they would, sometimes we'd see it was even written on the wrappings and stuff like that, because they believed that they were preparing the body, also not only that, the ka, the ba, all of it, they were preparing it for its journey through the afterlife. Because in the afterlife, they didn't believe it was like absent with the body, present with the Lord. They believed that they had to go on the the 12-hour, the nighttime travel past the Duat to get all the way to the scales. So the way you got through that was with the preparation practices. So often, and not only that, but let's just say, and this is always funny, it's like having a good lawyer. It's like, even if they knew, if they thought you were guilty and that your heart may betray you at the scales of the balance of Ma'at, where they would put your heart against the feather of Ma'at and see if it would come up even. They would put like an enchanted heart scarab instead, so that it would be, and then they would like ritually and magically make it to where it could not betray you, type of situation. And so if your heart wasn't with you, it was intentional. And if they replaced it with a heart amulet, it's because you probably were guilty, and then they would put that in with it. But there was like certain things that they would put in the wrappings that were special to, and then they would go through, they wouldn't cut the mouth yet. They didn't do the opening of the mouth ceremony yet. But essentially they prepare the body, they do all the wrappings, they say all the spells. And then there's literally like a funerary, depending on where the iPet was and where you were actually going to be interred, because not everybody had like pyramids and stuff. Oftentimes it was like, stabas and like rock cliffs and stuff, especially when we got outside of royalty and into more of like the financially elite type of thing. But between that is actually not too different from a funerary procession now, where the loved ones, the people from the city, would travel with the body from the, like, what would be considered the funeral home, all the way to where you're going to be interred, which would also be the tomb room. So in that way, I suppose it's very similar too. But then more stuff happened there. So you finally get, they literally prepare you. At one point, the people go away. The musicians and sound, the whole procession, they go away, and now it's just the role of the priests who are, doing these things to prepare you, and the servants are going to put the food in there, and they even put games sometimes, like games, everything you need for the afterlife. King Tut had like a million, not literally a million, that's hyperbole, but a million canes for walking, and then one of his chariots and stuff. Like, they really thought that it had to be prepared exactly. And on the walls they would put prayers. Now the Egyptian Book of the Dead wasn't all the way from the old kingdom. So that was more of like middle or late, where they actually made the Book of the Dead, what's it called, editable, to where it would be changed to the specificity of what would necessitate your specific journey through the Duat. I actually have a copy of it with me here. But and you can see they would write stuff on the walls, they would have stuff. And so the thing was this is that your and still Anubis is still there. You would say you were going up to various different things, which we'll talk about once you go through the false doors, and you would see, it seems as though when you read all the text and you look at the information, that even if you were trained to know all this your entire life, right, that you would just seem like, I don't remember. I can't remember my name. Who am I? And the key to the journey through the Duat is to really know the names and the certain things. Like, everything has to be exact. And so, like I said, having a good lawyer, it's like, even if you weren't really great in life, if you had somebody, because the bot and the ka would separate, back in the tomb, who would say, okay, I'm at this gate. What's the name of this person? The devourer? His name is this one who devours the sun. And then someone would, if you had it all in your tomb, that is what would guarantee you to make your safe all the way through. So that was very, very important. Is that there was somebody,
like a cheat sheet
yes,
in your tomb.
Like an incredibly important type of thing, which also makes you wonder what if you were a really great person and you just didn't have any, what happens if you're a really great person, you just die in battle and they just leave your body somewhere? What happens to you? So it doesn't seem to have quite the fairness of like like Judeo-Christianity, where you're based on it's all like based on your actions type of vibe in these type of pagan religion stuff too. But like, the preparation was a really big deal. And then essentially after the priests do the opening of the mouth ceremony, because you imagine if you had the linens all over your face and stuff like that, which also ties back to what we were saying about the we're talking about the healings with the 5,000 frequency. They also wrapped them in linen too. So the ancient Egyptians knew there was something to be about linen, but they would cut the mouth open. And it would be, if you did not, let's just say that the priest forgot to cut your mouth open, then what would happen to you in the Duat is you could not pronounce the names or the secret code words, or, to get through the journey of the Duat. You would be out of luck. So, I mean, if they forgot that, then I guess there's a lot of things, like I said, that aren't fair, so to speak. And so they would do the open the mouth ceremony, and that would be like, Because it's I always love in some of the cheesier like mummy movies that they have, where you see the mummy who never got the opening of the mouth ceremony, and they're like, and they cut them open. They're like stretching their jaw to talk. But if that is not done towards the idea of the ancients, then they would be unable to complete the Duat. And then what they would have, and the big deal is this, is the false doors. So there would be something that would look like a door that would just go through the stone, because the idea was that your physical body wouldn't step through it, but the spiritual body would step through it. So you would go through the false doors and enter into the first part of the Duat. Now, what is also to say, and Anubis is with you, by the way, the entire time, all the way from when you've taken your first, I guess your last breath and your first moment in the afterlife, all the way until the scales. Um, he essentially makes sure, because the people that you're going to meet in the Duat aren't necessarily, not the people, but the spiritual entities and whatnot that you're going to meet in the Duat are not necessarily scrupulous. So essentially, he makes sure that order and is kept the whole way. So if you said the right word, then you get through, and he will make sure that nothing comes, between you and what is supposed to happen. So, I mean, that's the funerary process. It's not too different, but just as a very quick recap, you die, you get brought to the IPEP, they fumigate you, they rub the outside of you with natron and herbs and incense, stuff like that, essentially like rubbing iodine on a body that you're about to cut into. Then they do the evisceration processes. They get rid of the viscera. Sometimes, not always, they put it in the canopic jars. Sometimes they put it back in the body. They would prepare it and put them back in the body. And in fact, later we see that they would also fill the body with like an embalming fluid, because they used to think that because Dr. Zahi Hawass does this thing now called scanning mummies, and he basically runs them through modern day MRIs and gets like almost like forensics reports about what has happened to them. So he's done this with like Queen Hatshepsut, who they have now found out, because they thought maybe she was knocked off by Thutmose III because she was the co-regent for a while. But medically speaking, they found out that she died of cancer. So it was not any type of assassination attempt or coup. But King Tutankhaten, which is his birth name, Tutankhaten, who became Amun, later, he they used to say he had, we know that he was heavily inbred, so he had like weird hips, but barely walked well, had a lot of canes, had an odd shaped torso and skull. But he had a big hole in the back of his head that people thought maybe that, got him. Because the same type of situation, he was, he became a pharaoh at 8. And when he was about 18, when the co regency would end, all of a sudden Tutankhaten died. And he had a wife, an Moon, and they almost had twins, but the twin babies died, and he's actually in the twins are in King Tut's um, funerarium. But what's it called? The same type of thing. They noticed that in King Tut's case, Zahi did the investigation that they believe he died from the femoral break and not the hole in the back of his head, because the femoral break that he probably got in the chariot race got too infected, and he ended up probably dying of like septicemia, and that the hole in the back of his head was actually made post mortem to pour the embalming fluid through. And so it was not actually a death thing. So, I mean, stuff like this comes up, but you have to, the thing is that even within ancient Egypt, the things that were happening in that room were not uniform either. So sometimes the body's going in the canopic jar, sometimes it's not. Sometimes they pack it back in, sometimes they don't. So it is very different all the way through. But essentially, the same thing. They get you through, whether they put your organs back in that are treated, whether they put them in canopic jars instead. At the end of the day, they wrap you up. They put special amulets and jets and stuff that are meaningful with purpose. Sometimes you get a heart scarab. Then they have a funerary procession that is still a modern thing to happen, where the body goes from the IPET, which is like a funeral home, to where you're going to be interred like a cemetery, but it's not a cemetery in this case, to either, the Istana or the, pyramid or whatever. And that is the funeral. But that is just the beginning, because the real thing is the journey through the Duat. And that is what matters in ancient Egypt, is the Duat passage. So
Yeah, so the whole mummification thing that people are familiar with is just to prepare you for this
yeah,
journey as well. It seems as well, like you saying about like the heart scarab and making sure that your mouth is cut open and that you've got your cheat sheet in your
yeah,
tomb, that like as you were saying, it's not necessarily fair, that I would imagine if someone is of lower class with this belief
right,
system, that like you wouldn't be prepared properly, and therefore even if you personally had been a good person in life, you
yeah.
might not make it through the journey.
Yeah, and they had weird focal points. Like, they were really focused on fingernails and toenails. Like, brain, throw that out. But, fingernails and toenails, if they were afraid it would come off, they would try to reattach it. And like the elites would get like gold finger caps to make sure they had fingernails and toenails in the afterlife. So it's like, what's important here? I don't know. Throw if the heart's bad, toss that one too. Give them a heart scare. Brain, who cares? Fingernails. Don't you dare send me to the afterlife without my pinky nail. Like, that's what was happening here. But it's a whole
I
different.
mean, I like getting my nails done the same as any other girl, but that
You'd
seems
be
a
in
bit
luck.
extreme.
They'd be gold afterwards, yeah. But
Ooh.
yeah. But that's what I'm saying, though. It's like they really thoughtfully try to take care of the afterlife in those moments, because the idea was really, once it was sealed, that was supposed to be it. Um, but they sometimes they had cults that would still bring food, for a while, because really, once your body becomes glorified, when you make it all the way through to the field of Yanana, that you probably don't need the food anymore. It's just like somebody needs to make sure that you have enough food through here. Once you make it to the field of golden reeds, you're um you'll be able to substantiate your own health and stuff there. So you really just need enough food to make it through the Duat, which is literally an overnight process. The 12 hours of Duat. It's from the sundown, and then midnight's the center, to the sun rises. That's really the about what you need food wise. But yeah, that's this. It's just
I could
the
eat a lot of food in 12 hours if you
well, then
gave me
tell
the
you everybody
opportunity.
who's to prepare you. Buffet line over here. And then another thing that didn't really happen that people talk about where they're like, they killed the assistants so that they could serve them in the afterlife. They have the shabtis. So a shabti is like a wood, clay, wax, whatever little figurine that they believed in the afterlife was enchanted to serve only you. And so you didn't need to have humans killed, because what if they were found wanting and then they didn't make it, and they were they ceased to exist at the weighing of the scale. So you couldn't risk that. So they believed in the Shabdis, and they were enchanted to perform your tasks without tire, without needing sustenance either. Which is funny, because I used to have an AI assistant a long time ago, and I called it Professor Shabti, because and nobody got the reference, because I guess they don't know their ancient Egyptian enough for you. But yeah, but Professor Shabti, I miss her. She's a
That is
girl.
a genius name for an AI assistant.
Yeah. Um,
So, what would this 12-hour journey of the Duat look like?
Well, I actually printed it out, because I think you watched my other show, you watched the Osiris Awaits type of things, where I did an
Yes,
hour
and
by
if
hour.
anyone else is if anyone else is interested, I will link it down below. It's a very detailed PowerPoint
Yeah, so
presentation of
this
the
is
whole
less
process.
detailed, because I figured we would, because that thing drones on. I just drone on for hours when we're talking about the Dua. So I did more of a like condensed version. So I'm just going to tell you per hour where we are, obstacles, type of stuff like that, but not at all like it was in the other one. Much faster. So hour one, this is where we're at. We're at the western horizon. So at the western horizon, you're going to see the boat. So the solar bark that Ra is going to travel on. So here's also the story behind it, is that Ra is going to travel every night. That's why the ancient Egyptians believed that the sun went away. is that Ra would disappear every night, and during the hours of darkness, he would travel through the Duat on his solar bark, seeking to defeat Apophis, which was like a serpent that is chaos um, and destruction. Literally, I like the it's very. They also have sort of the world snake in like Norse mythology as well. But there's this movie I saw as a kid that it always resonates. It was some sort of like Stephen King, even though he's gone downhill recently, but Stephen King movie where it was like something about where they would eat time. There was like this, I think it started with an F or an L. Oh, the Langoliers. He had this movie called The Langoliers where it was like these entities would come and they would destroy time and stuff. You could hear them coming and then it would just cease to exist. And that always kind of, I saw that movie first as a child and then I learned about Apophis later. And it always resonated similarities to me. That Apophis was essentially going to destroy and instead of with the Langoliers, it was like silence and nothingness. It seems like it would be chaos and confusion instead with Apophis. So every single night, Ra goes and fights Apophis. And this is happening every single night. So here's something that people don't understand. I feel like even people I'm talking to in the field is that you essentially had to wait. Everybody's going at the same time. You don't go through the doors and do your journey until the sun goes down. So it's not like I died at 7 a.m. or whatever. My service was done at 7 a.m. Then I'm just going to go marching over and start my thing in the broad daylight. Everything, it's a nighttime travel through the Duat. From when the sun goes down, the sun goes up. So in the Duat, Ra is traveling and he's going to fight Apophis, and Set, which is sometimes called Seth, but Set used to, before he was known as a bad guy, because he's got a bad rap after what he did to Osiris in regards to Nephthys and Isis. He used to be known as a hero in ancient Egypt because he actually saved Ra um, when Apophis had almost overtaken Ra. Set stood in the gap and saved the day. And so Set actually, before he became like the desert god of like anger, redness, and chaos, was used in love spells originally. So in that same asset, once you become like a glorified body, you can ride on the solar bark, but you're making your way through the Duat simultaneously as Ra, not on his boat. You have to have your own boat, or some people, because you can also travel as a bird in the ancient time. So some people are trying to fly through and stuff like that as well. But if somebody has prepared and put an actual boat in, like in King Tut's not sarcophagus, in that room, then you have your own boat too. Or it could be so simple as to just magically make sure that the spells and incantations provide you with a boat. So anyway, you're getting in this water as well. All right. The sun is going to enter into the hidden river. You're going to be traveling down. You're going to come to your first gates with guardians that have serpents. There's going to be knife-bearing guardians. There's going to be door bolts that have they're going to be opened by the exact pronunciation of certain words and clues, which, I'm grabbing my book, which is going to be in here. So you better hope that your spirit the other part of you is still in the tomb with as we said, the cheat codes. So you have to say certain things. There's no way you would be able to do this just from memorizing it. And it seems as though there is a line of separation where you just can't remember your name. You know what I mean? And so they're going through and they're reading, oh, yes, yes, oh, you're here, okay, here. Say this exactly. Because if you get it wrong at all, that's the end of you, right? So you go through the gates and guardians. Here there are allies, Siahu, Heku, there's Mihen. There's different obstacles, like we said, misnaming the gates, fear of dark waters, hostile shades drawn to the light. And you just have to keep going. You got to say what you're supposed to say. That's hour one. You're just starting out. You're just getting through the bolts. Some people, if you don't have a boat and you're not going to travel as a bird, you're just like, what happens to you? Hour two now, which is you're traveling concurrent with Ra's boat. Now you're at the caves or the caverns of the silent. So there's going to be winding caves. The boat kind of slows because this is where the silent ones are. And you have to have your voice here. And so being the voice is going to be effective, you have to have gone through the opening of the mouth. There's going to be low passage that's going to be barred by serpents. There's going to be watchers that demand identifications of their masters. So you're going to see various snakes, and they're going to be like, declare the name of my master, and I'll let you through. And if you don't know it, or the precinct, where they came from, like, you serve, the fiery serpent from the lake of fire. I mean, if you have to say it exactly where they come from, then they let you pass here. Here, Thoth also can get involved, but Anubis is going to make sure and ensure that if you said the right name, he's not going to help you. He's not going to give you any hints. But if you say the right name, they have to let you pass. So he keeps law and order. It's like traveling with the sheriff. Um, but obstacles, de- decapitating guardians, loss of breath, and confusion of directions. So this is why when you read in the book and stuff like that, it doesn't seem like you could have just been a really good student in life, because it seems like all of a sudden, even things you knew, you just can't remember, you can't recall. It has to be in the tomb with you, or you don't have it. You have to speak the right to breathe. You have to name the passage. You can't boast. Air is granted at this point. The bark passes through without harm. Silent spirits receive recitations and become provisioned. So then you get to hour 3, which is sands and towing. So the water is going to thin into a sandbank, and the boat's going to have to be hauled across there. This is the gate of the dried mouth. It's going to be warded by jackal-headed guardians of the waste. Remember, Anubis is also a jackal-headed god. So Hekach, which is the like the magic, is going to empower ropes. So imagine a golden rope that would be down a rope of the sky, and you'll be able to pull your way through the muck. You have to offer the correct words. You have to offer cool waters to the guardians that thirst, and your bark is hauled successfully. The desert powers are appeased, and momentum is preserved. You're still moving, because you don't want to be stuck in the muck out in the Duat with all these demons and stuff. And what is also is an unusual concept with this is that so in like Judeo Christianity again, Jesus is everywhere, right? And demons are some places. Um, but Anubis seems like he's some places, right? He's definitely at your side the whole time, but he's also with everybody else in their moments of death too. So he is in multiple places. He's not in every place, like he's not omnipresent, but he is in all places of death type of constraints. So then we go to hour 4. We're in the dark realm of the Sokar. It's a silent and deep cavern that's associated. There's no wind. There's no like mechanical engineering to get through. It's a sunless chamber where the doors open inward, and some passages require that the boat has to transform. So Sokar is going to grant you secret routes, and Mihen's going to encircle the bark for protection. So you are going to be traveling in perfect darkness, and you're going to be wandering around with no landmarks. So there's nothing. It's black. It's perfect darkness, and the guardians are not going to respond to you. So it's like, you know how they say that people who are in sensory deprivation tanks can usually like barely stand it because there's like no sound. It's like nothing. They have like the most soundproof rooms, and supposedly people go nutso because they hear their own heartbeat and their own blood, you know, moving. So it's like the same type of concept here that you're being tested on. It's absolutely dark and nobody's talking and there's no landmarks, and you're just kind of, I don't know, holding on to the concept that the Sokar is going to grant you maybe a path, and Mihan's going to try to protect you the whole time. And then you're just traveling like this, for an hour. It's like horrible. So you might have to adopt forms to get through this passages, like serpent boats or a bird boat. You have to hold your silence. You have to present Sokar's titles correctly. Like again, you need somebody in there. Hidden transit is achieved, so you want to silently and secretly get through this region. You don't want to make your presence known. You're not going to be just lighting a lantern there as you travel through. The idea is that you are able to sneak through and be protected, and that there's no sound, nothing. So you make it through to hour 5. Hour 5 is the lake of fire and the boons of coolness. So this is where it is you emerge with the enemies of the sun. The basins of cool water are going to refresh the justified. The gates are flanked by fire-spitting cobras. And there's a judge that will examine why you want passage here. So you have to give exact responses. Again, it's all about the exactitudes of saying the right words, identifying the right gates, all the stuff. So there's a goddess of the flame who will distinguish friend from foe. So if you're not good, there's a guardian who has who will temper the fire for the faithful, so it'll cool down to let you go through. It's still not going to be great. It'll incinerate the hostile. Heat could crack your boat. It could dry the tongue out. Again, they'll turn up the heat if you're not so good, and they'll turn it down and make it a little bit more temperate to let you through. You have to be able to speak. Your boat can't sink. You don't want to be incinerated. So you're trying to make it through here. That's the big one. You want to stand under Ma'at's sign. You have to name the cobras without flinching. And you request the cool waters only from the sanctioned beasts. That you can ask that one, you can't ask that one. Again, cheat sheet, like cheat sheet on steroids type of thing. So you want to make it through this section, you want to be cooled within the fire type, cooled, within a furnace, so to speak. And the enemies are usually reduced, scattered, unable to speak, dried out. So then now you get to hour 6, which is right in the middle of your 12 hours. That's your midnight. This is when you are reunited with Osiris. Okay, so Osiris is also helping Ra at the same time in Ra's solar bark, which we're all kind of, imagine if you saw kind of an armada of boats traveling on the open sea, and then you see Ra's solar bark, like, this glorious thing, and a bunch of little boats following along, and they're all trying to travel through at the same time. But I think he even goes like lights out when he goes to the last one. So now you're at the center of the night. The bark is going to reach the precinct of Osiris. And this is when he basically, like, the vitality is renewed. So if you are just running through the fire region and staying silent in the dark region, you're like exhausted, right? And Osiris is there at the midway point to pep it up, because really the goal is to get you to Osiris at the end, because you have your psychopomp Anubis, but you want to be reunited with Osiris permanently. So here he kind of gives you a little, it's like when you're running a marathon, they give you water. He's one of the stops.
He's one of those station guys, just
like
throwing a cup of water at you.
Dump it on your head and you keep running. Like, this is Osiris. He's like, come on, buddy. Here you go. And then you keep going. That's Osiris. He's pretty good guys. Standard good guy. But it says the doors are going to open on the mound of rebirth. The bark is going to be drawn close to the god. So you're going to see the allies here, which are Osiris, Isis, Nephthys, and Anubis. And even Thoth is going to restore, or what do you call it? Record the restoration. The part where you have to worry about here is if the inertia, like the boat stops moving. The rites that you're saying are going to fail. You didn't say the right words. You didn't do the right things. You could get stuck here. But for this part, is not too bad, right? So you're going to have to say the words of joining and renewal. That is where you say this portion of it. So you're trying to join with Osiris. You're trying to be renewed. Like I said, dumping the water on your head, drinking the water. This is, you have to say it. You present a heart that's unburdened, and you accept the embrace of Osiris without fear. Okay, so your soul is being recharged, right? You're right in the sun. The circuit's going to guarantee that you keep going toward dawn. So your goal is to make it to dawn when the sun comes up. So then that was hour 6, our halfway point. So then we have hour 7, binding Apophis. So remember, this is where chaos is happening. It happens just after midnight. Apophis is trying to overthrow Ra. Could you imagine if you were so unlucky to be dying the night that Apophis almost overtook Ra, and like Set had to come in, and you're just trying to get to the afterlife, and you're like, oh no, what is happening?
Guys, I just want eternal rest. Can you not right now with the drama?
Yeah, please. Okay, we're just trying to get through here. But imagine, according to the philosophies of what's going on here, there was an unfortunate group of people who are just trying to get to the field of golden reeds, and this is going on. Like, come on, Ra, pep it up here. I got some place to be. So Just imagine that, if you will. So this is where you were binding it. It's an ambush. Every night he's like seeing how he can like sneak up on everybody and get them. He's not just like marching like in an organized fashion. It's like guerrilla warfare here. So the surface or the serpent Apophis, he's going to arise. He's going to try to swallow the light. He's going to try to swallow the boat. He's going to just try to take over everything to where there is no sunlight ever again. So there's no gate. It's just a literal open battlefield in the water. So there's going to be, sillily enough, almost like crews of like harpooners, trying to fight off all of these things coming, trying to shoot the Apophis and get him, subdued at least. There's Mihan, there's the lion-headed and knife-bearing deities that are going to surround the serpent. Here, obstacles are like cosmic paralysis, coils that immobilize. So you imagine your boat's getting, squeezed. It is a snake after all. And then also imagine, the people who would play the flutes for the snakes as they come out of the basket, and they're like, and in all the cartoons, the snakes lock eyes with you, and all of a sudden the guy's going like this too. The same type of concept that you don't want to be hypnotized by the gaze of the snakes. So we're really playing hard into the attributes of the snake, or at least what is even now, I guess, the modern Middle Eastern standard of the concept of snake charmers. They're going to coil around you and get you. They're going to hypnotize you, stuff like that. And then there's people who are trying to, do it. So you get through, you have to do like binding spells in the binding sequence. You have to go through. People it's really disrespectful because you have to spit on Apophis, you have to trample on the coils, you got to pierce them with the spears with all the harpooners, you got to burn fragments, you got to recite things that are going to break the cutting of the cords and stuff that are drawing them in. So imagine like mercenary pirates are trying to overtake your ship, and they're trying to put their stuff on you and draw your boat in. You want to cut those cords, you want to harpoon the snake. You want to say things that are going to bind it. You want to get rid of this thing every night. And so at this point, Apophis is going to be fettered, to go away. Motion is going to, now you're not just stuck in this. It's almost like time doesn't stop. It's like, it seems like everything stopped and while this battle is going on, this battlefield in the middle of it. And then now it's like all of a sudden, once he's been harpooned, essentially, and bound, all of a sudden it seems like everything starts moving again, and you're no longer stuck in this like essence of the battlefield, and the boat's going to surge forward. If you've done it well, at this moment you're waiting for the boat to start its travel again. So if you're just stuck there's something you haven't done yet. Maybe it wasn't the spell, maybe you haven't done this, there's something you haven't done. You're waiting for the boat to go. That gets us to hour 8. Let's see, 8 is more comfortable here. So you got doors, bolts, and measures. This time, you're going to go through a region of gates and measuring halls and the architecture of sacred technology. And so there's going to be a series of doors where they're all going to be named. You have to go to certain doors in order. It's the same type of thing. Thoth is always around here, it seems, as a timekeeper. He's going to be, there's going to be different guardians who are going to unlock certain doors with secret measures that you have to take. And you have to address them in certain orders. You have to put them with the right doors. You can't do this without the cheat sheet. So you have to have the cheat sheet. So if you have the people, you really want to pick who's going to inter you in the afterlife, because you're heavily dependent on the living world for all of these things, which is also probably why it couldn't possibly be open at this time to everybody, because who is going to have such a highly educated person in this field who would be able to prep all these things with everybody's basic death as well? It is the belief is that it is highly fine-tuned skill in which they know highly technical things. You're not going to hire the local butcher to do brain surgery. You know what I mean? It's like that type of thing. And how many top-notch brain surgeons are there as opposed to how many local butchers do you know? So that's the thing, is they can't handle these fine-tuned surgeons, only have so much time. They can't handle just death as a whole type of situation. So you have to go through, every component has to lock up or line up, right doors and bolt, right person to unlock it, right things that you said, you did it in order. it's like a clock. You have to have all the gears going, you know. And then in rhythm, you just keep going. The doors keep opening. You keep traveling through. If everything matches, you're like, it's a cosmic clock. Really, seriously, it's like a cosmic clock. So then you get to hour 9, the field of provisions and work. So this is kind of the fertile zones. Okay, so you've gotten past a lot of the horror because you're past Apophis. The big deal was Apophis. So you've bound him. So now it's like a little bit better. So you're getting through here. It's the field of reeds, the field of sowing, seeds, and water and labor waiting. You know, it's like the springtime. So you know that in ancient Egypt, they don't have 4 seasons like we do now. They don't have like a spring, winter, summer, and fall. They have planting your seeds. There are 3 seasons. They have planting your seeds. You know, it's based on the flooding of the Nile. Planting your seeds, taking care of them, harvesting your plants. Those are the 3. That's the 3 seasons. So in the same concept here, you want to make it to the golden field, so you have to do the work ahead of time, so that when you get there, there's stuff. So this is where your shabtis, you're going to want to activate your shabtis to really like start to go to work for you. I guess if nobody gave you any shabtis, you're going to be running your way thin here, and you're going to want to do stuff for like the deities of like agriculture, so that they can help you too, because a lot of stuff that you have to do here. So if you're not prepared, right? If you don't have a bunch of shabtis, you don't have offerings or spells or stuff like that for the deities of like agriculture and stuff like that. Hold on. This is going to seem like endless work. There's going to be no way you can do it. You just work, 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 work. And it's not going to be done. And you figure you have an hour, a literal hour to get it all done. So unless you have like a team that descends and the agricultural gods, it's going to be impossible, right? So you need the Shabti. Professor Shabti needs to show up, okay? And then if you don't do it, you don't get any rations. If you have the failure to do this, you're not going to get rations for what you need. If names are forgotten, stuff like that. So not only, it's almost like an Excel spreadsheet. You activate your Shabti, and then you give them like a work list, like a work formula of like do this, and then you unleash them, which is actually so similar to my Professor AI, my Professor Shabdi. That was my AI assistant when I was teaching at museums. So in her programming that I programmed her, I made her a museum assistant, which was basically what she was doing for me anyway. It's so on the nose that I can't believe that nobody even in the museums got the fine tunedness of it, but whatever. So you legitimate your plot of land that you want in the afterlife and stuff like that. You receive offerings. You want to make sure that your future estate is like stable and stuff like that. You have someplace to go to, and it also proves that you are capable of taking care of yourself in the afterlife once you get to the field of golden reeds. You'll be able to, because it's like the field of golden reeds is like a perfected Egypt. The plants never die. All the crops are bountiful. I mean, it's like that type of thing, but there still seems to be like an everyday life, but there's like a 0 failure rate type of thing. So here is kind of where you have to prove that you deserve to be sustained there, like even if it wasn't a perfect one, that you would be able to do the work and have the blessings and go through the motions and stuff like that. So this is that place. Hour 9 is important. We're almost to the clearing here. So hour 10, we got starry caverns and inversions. So there's going to be star-filled chambers and beings that are upside down or backwards to normal cosmic law. You have to realize that. And if you know the story behind Nut and Geb, what is the one in the middle? That's Geb and Shu. So in the beginning, the goddess of the sky and of the heavens fell in love with the god Geb of the ground, and they fell in love. And depending on who, some people believe it is Ptah, some people believe it's Ra, some people believe Atum. So there's all different creation gods depending on what sect of philosophy you're following. But let's say Ra. Ra said, "I forbid you two to have children together. The night, the sky, and the land cannot be together, because then there's no creation." So it was necessary for there to be nothing in between. So Nut is pregnant, and Geb is forever separated, and Ra sent Shu to keep them separated from each other forever. So they say that Nut would put um constellations or shooting stars or beautiful things like aurora borealis and aurora australis in the sky as love letters to Geb, who she can never be reunited with. So she's pregnant with 5 children, and um, Ra has forbade her from giving birth. So she devises this idea because even though, so they said they had a 360-degree year, but because they used the base systems of 12 and 60, which are multiples to hit 360, but they knew there was 365 days. So they just believed there was 360 days on the calendar and 5 days that exist outside of time to where you could do high magic. So she found, like, I'm telling you, this is very, very comparable to lawyers. That she found the place where you can sneak in and the little bit of wiggle room, and she decided that have um she was going to give birth one baby per day of the 5 days outside of time, which is where you get the creator gods of the elder Horus, Apophis and Ra, and I'm sorry, elder Horus, Apophis. Nope, I'm saying random words here. Here we go. Elder Horus, Osiris, Set, Nephthys, and Isis. So Elder Horus you don't really hear a lot about after, I mean, not as much as the other Horus that shows up, but that's where this all started, like with all of this, the traveling and stuff like that, and how we come apart to Anubis. So to go back to it, if you see the imagery of Nut, she's bending almost like a rainbow. So it's almost like she's upside down. So she's like, she doesn't look like a rainbow though, but I'm saying like the way she arcs in the sky. So that's why it's upside down. So the portholes here are oddly disorienting. It's not the same, okay? Some passages might require an inversion to align with like star paths. There are astral deities. There are fairy stars. Thoth, of course, is still regulating the courses. What's your obstacles here? Vertigo, decapitation. If you're going the wrong way, or you know, you have to align. You have to have there could even be dismembering like winds. So you have to adopt like a stance. You have to speak the certain star names. You have to keep your heart and your head, I guess, because you don't want that cut off, aligned with Ma'at. And then you get safe passage through this weird inversion, wonky type of place. And the traveler now is reading the sky's grammar. That gets to hour 11. We're almost there. The eastern ascent. So the river is quickly, you're heading towards dawn. And at dawn is when you have to weigh your heart on the scale. The eastern horizon is starting to brighten behind the mountains, This is your final barrier. There's high bolts. There's going to be a gardener who's going to, a guardian. Could you imagine they shove a gardener at the end? A guardian who's going to test the traveler's completeness to make sure you've had everything on the boat that you're traveling in. Hopefully there's lots of spells and that they've granted you a crew in the spells that have been written for you. So they're going to tighten the ropes and do everything that's going to make it to where like we're going to get that the oars are good, the protective goddess is going to stand there. It's going to be the last convulsions of Apophis because the sun, imagine you're bound and he's trying to get free and he's got to do it before the sun comes up. This is like the final push, because if you guys can just stay the course through the sun, making it over the mountain, then you're through and at least you made it to the scale. Here, this is also Apophis's final push. And he's like, let me out of here, So this is his final convulsions. He's trying to make sudden storms happen. Even in the mind, doubt and some people might start doubting, am I even going to make it? Or maybe you might not mind everything properly. Maybe you might not tighten the things, make sure the oars are good, and you let down your guard because you're doing like a premature celebration. You're like, I'm almost there, So this is where you have to stay the course the whole way. And it's not like this is Apophis's or anybody in the Duat's first ride. They're doing this every single night. So they know that a majority of travelers are going to woohoo, celebrate and not do everything. So they've fine-tuned their attacks on how can we get them even at the last moment. So you get your final gates open. The bark is starting to align with the birth canal of the sky. So the reason why I brought up Nut is because the lore says that literally You come out of the birthing canal, that Ra literally is rebirthed through like the vaginal canal of Nut every night. So right now it's like literally the labor, and that's why I use the word convulsions where Apophis is moving around, because it's like the labor birthing pains when you're just about to push the baby out type of vibe. And this is where all of the people who are trying to make it to the hall of Ma'at's judgment, and the sun is trying to rise. Ra has to be there. Ra has to make it. So we're like almost there. And then so this is the final gate, you're aligning it. Finally, the 12th hour, right? The birth of the rebirth of Ra every night. You're pushing your way through and becoming Kepri. So you're in the birth canal of the sky, which ties in completely with Nut. Um, in the threshold, the sun is reborn as Kepri. The horizon doors swing outward, because remember the other door swung inward. This is swinging outward. The world receives light, so it's like the sun rays coming out. Which also they also have a secondary sun god called Aten, which is who Aten worship while he was a kid. That's who Akhenaten and Nefertiti, when she switched her name to Neferuaten, they were worshiping this god monotheistically. It was like a god that looked like a sun, and the rays were hands that were reaching out. So you make it there. The sun has come. Now all the deities are also being renewed. The crews, they're chanting hymns. They're living, they're doing it. People, the living that are awake and are living in the real world are saying their morning prayers. So that's also bolstering all of these gods and goddesses and stuff like that. You still gotta, you're not out of the water yet, literally and figuratively. You assume the form of Kepri. You have to gather the names, gather the heart. The image of your identity has to be put together. And then finally, when you're rebirthed, the traveler's going to arise with the sun. And sometimes they say you can visit the land of the living real quick before you make it all the way there, to kind of get like another Gatorade swish, to get like the, you can hear their prayers, you can receive their offerings, because you're about to go to the hall of two truths. You're going to go to the hall of judgment, which is like literally legal. So now you've made it through the Duat. So now we still got Anubis. You really got to hope they did whatever they were supposed to do, because this is the moment means all of this is what comes to. So if you were not a good person, there are things that you have to do, like negative confessions, which is so lawyer legalese type of semantic, to where you're supposed to say a certain truths, and you're supposed to say, well, why you're making a case for yourself about before the judge makes their decision. So you're presenting your case, and you're like, let's just say that you're supposed to say, well, I haven't killed anyone, but let's say you have killed someone. So you would fine tune that negative confession to be like, well, I haven't strangled anyone. I haven't boiled anyone alive, but there are certain negative confessions that you have to say to make it to where they reach all of the criteria. However, they can be semantically tap danced around, like I said, you could be like, instead of saying, well, I haven't killed anyone, you could be like, well, I haven't boiled anyone alive. I haven't strangled anybody. No, you just cut his head off, but whatever, who's counting here? So you get to the negative confessions, you present your case legally, then you come up to the hall of judgment, where Ma'at is going to take a feather out of her wing, and they're going to take your heart or your heart scarab, and they're going to put them on the scale, right? And so Thoth is recording this whole thing the whole time, and Anubis is there to make sure everything stays as it ought. And then we have, what do you say? And then we have Thoth is recording, Anubis is calibrating the scale, Ma'at's lending her feathers. You're doing everything you can to possibly make it. You take your heart or your heart scarab, placed on the scale, and the feathers placed. Now, and I doubt it happens often, but let's say your heart was much lighter than the feather, then you are just golden, literally. Just go. Keep going through. If
Fast
it's
pass VIP.
Fast pass, give that person a golden chariot to the reed or the field of reeds. If it's even, is what you're hoping for. But if it sinks, that your heart is way heavier, then immediately, like, you cease to exist. So they have Amit. Some people say Omnit, but Amit who is like a little weird creature that is going to like gobble you up, and then you cease to exist from existence. I mean, anywhere. So the thing is that you could have made and survived and done all these things, and then you come up to the scale, and then you get gobbled up. So let's just say you were a bad person. You made it through. You're really well prepared, but it turns out that maybe you had some secret evil in your heart that not even your closest preparers knew about, and they put your real heart on the scale, and then it betrays you at this last minute, and then basically tells all like with all the secrets and dirt, it becomes heavier and it betrays you. Then you still kick the bucket. And then, but if they give you the heart amulet, and then they've magically enchanted it to where it cannot betray you, it stays light, whatever. That's how you make it through. So then that's the big hurrah. You finally you make your way through. They allow you to pass. You get reunited with Osiris. You're now the body, the part of you, the Ba and the Ka, they're all reunited, and into you're going to travel now to the Hall of Reeds. You have options now. You get to go through to the Hall of Golden Reeds, right, which is like a glorified, perfect version of Egypt, where none of the plants die. You're not going to get gobbled up by a crocodile when you're trying to go to the Nile. You make yourself all the way through, right? And you have an option of three things you can do. Now you can just stay there and live your life all the time, where everything's great. You have your shabdis working. You can travel back to the land of the living now, and you can or you can even join Ra on his soul. Maybe you liked adventure. Maybe you're like, this is the life for me. I want to go. Or maybe you're like, man, Ra sucks at this. He almost died the night I was there. Everybody get your stuff. We need to help him. You know what I mean? Like, because what happens if Ra ceases to exist? What happens to this field if chaos takes over? And essentially, that's the hurrah. So you could do that. You could some nights fight with him. You're in a mood and you're like, let's go fight, boys. You can go with him. You stay in your field. You can see your loved one. But the thing that always made me wonder. So the idea is that once you've made it all the way through and everything's reunited and your complete glorified self and you get to be there, the concept is that essentially you're safe and that you don't really need food to be put into your tomb anymore, because you're going to be able to harvest your own food now, right? So the other hurrah that I've always thought about is, what about your cartouche, right? If you're a royalty, the whole concept was that as long as your name was still on the tongues of the living, or at the bare minimum, your name was in somewhere in an enclosed cartouche, that you existed, right? So, and definitely you would assume, definitely during the 12-hour ride through the Duat. But what happens if you've already you've already made it through? What happens if somebody destroys your temple, or somebody specifically, like in the Temple of Abydos, Seti the First is doing the pharaonic lineages on the walls, and he left out like Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, King Tutankhamun. He left those all out, so their names are not preserved in it. And we see in a lot of places where they have chiseled out they've chiseled out their cartouche. Do you cease to exist after then? Or is the amount of our cartouches making you visible? Or are you like phasing out, And so that's always been my final question, is once you get all the way through the finish line and you're basically as Osiris as your guarantor, are you untouchable now by the land of the living and you just get to do your own thing? Are there certain things like, well, if they scratched out your name, you can't travel back anymore, you just got to stay over there? I mean, I don't know. I always thought about that. What is the cartouche deal? Because you figure it seems as though the current, we're talking about ancient Egypt. Maybe they got it wrong, but it seems like the ancient Egyptian concept of it was that you were always erasable. Because why would people like King Seti way in the future, after your 12-hour solar bark, where either you got eaten or you didn't make it through, after that 12 hours, if the ancients didn't believe it was still affected by it, then why are future pharaohs hacking it away? But then maybe they just got it wrong on the land of the living, and then the land in the spiritual realm, it's unaffected. You know what I mean? So that's my last kind of like me type of thing.
It is interesting because if it's only required that you be remembered for the 12 hours of your journey, like,
Right.
I'm pretty sure even if you were the most hated person ever, you'd
Yeah.
be
Right.
remembered for 12 hours.
Well,
Like,
and
it's
then
not a lot of time to be like, that dude.
yeah, or maybe they purposely nobody say his name type of thing. Everybody scroll out any writings of it. You know, maybe they were smashing all the stuff. So that's the thing. It's like, what is the purpose of having the guarantor of making it through to the field of golden reeds if at one point maybe nobody remembers Egypt anymore and you cease to exist anyway? Maybe or are you conscious of your disappearance? So is it better just to be gobbled up by Amit to begin with and not have the happiness and then see it taken away? Or maybe you're in there like King Tutankhamun, everybody's still talking about. So what are you going to do? Be a citizen of the golden reeds and then see, oh, Bob disappeared. Bye, Bob. I guess somebody crossed out his cartouche, you know. And I like, is he drinking
What if you're
wine?
like the last guy standing as well?
You're
Like,
like,
you're the
oh
most
no.
historically relevant. You're like,
Yeah,
that
right.
would kind of be hell.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it makes me think that perhaps even within the philosophy of ancient Egypt, that perhaps the land of the living got it a little bit wrong as opposed to what's going on. But that would be highly unusual because also the belief system is that the gods of ancient Egypt are having regular powwows with you at their temples or whatever, and also traveling with you here. So how come these spiritual beings that are in both places aren't giving you accurate information? So there's a lot to consider with it, you know, and I think that that bit of it all is not tidied up well. You know, there's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of um, loose ends, so to speak. That it just doesn't fit in a tiny, nice little package to be put on a shelf for
Well,
antiquity. You know,
there's always got to be one question left unanswered to keep us interested.
right? Well, I got a lot of questions about it, but yeah, that's the big one. The big one. So
So you mentioned before, like, a couple of misconceptions that people have about ancient Egypt and the funerary practices and all of that. But are there any others that you feel like have like sort of
no.
disseminated in popular culture that you're like, that's not true?
Well, definitely the cartouche thing, I think, is kind of like and not an end all be all. I think also that people thought like everybody was mummified, and that's not necessarily true either. And also I think another big one, I think even with academics, is I think that sometimes people thought that the canopic jars always had the organs, and they don't. Sometimes they're just the organs are placed back in the body or whatever. Or what happens if I don't know. What happens if you were like killed by crocodile attack, which is possible, and your whole liver is missing, you know, because the crocodile ate it. So give it back, you know. And then what are you supposed to do with the canopic jar? So they've kind of have like workarounds where you don't necessarily need all the organs in place. And I think that's something everybody just assumes. And there also is a time period, I think, where like there weren't canopic jars either. So and also I also think that people don't understand that there's a wide lineage of Egypt from the Ptolemaic or you know the Old Kingdom or even pre-kingdom, pre-dynasty Egypt to Ptolemaic, and that there's a wide variation of like mummification processes and belief systems on it. And then you even see within, like I talked about earlier, that there are different follow throughs where do you believe that creation was with Ptah? Do you believe in the creation myth with Ra? Do you believe in the creation myth with Atum? So even amongst the concurrently existing people, they are following different creation myths, you know, out of Memphis or Thebes, you know, and there's that variation even in the land of the living. So I don't think that people realize how varied it is, and that even some goddess and goddesses are different or they represent different things in different sites. So sometimes you'll say like, oh, Sekhmet was the battle kitty, and then she got turned into what's her name? Starts with an H, Hathor, and because of they have the story about where she was doing Ra's bidding and she was killing everybody who disagreed, and they're like, hey, if she kills everybody, so nobody's gonna listen to you, and Thoth was trying to stop her. She's trying to kill the gods. So they devised a way to get her drunk. So they took a bunch of beer or mead, something, some form of alcohol, dyed it red. She thought it was blood. She drank it till she got herself into a drunken tizzy. And then Ra changed her attributes, made her into Hathor, and then changed her into like a goddess of motherhood and love and protection of children. Yeah. So, but then in other places you have Hathor and Sekhmet um, separately existing, So it's like I think that's another deal. Or somebody I've even seen like I said, the greener the student, the people who haven't done like Egyptology in practice, and it's more like I just read this in a book, and I haven't had enough experience to do it. They're the biggest, you know, the loudest cries, where you'll be like, oh, well, this happened with Sigma. No, that's not what happened. Because if you read this is here. It's like, no, you got to realize that there are variances. There's a huge crescendo in ancient Egypt. There's a huge, it is, there's different, so, some people will believe, like I said, the big two are Memphis and Thebes, the Theban version or the Memphite version. And it's like, even amongst those, there's different belief systems all the way through. So realize that this is just, there are the most famous ones that have really, and was it most famous in ancient times, or was it the ones that we found about now? Because King Tut wasn't that big of a deal in the ancient world, but he is to the modern world because he has the most intact tomb to be discovered. And really, Howard Carter did like a smash and grab when he was going through that thing, but that's a conversation for another day. So
That sounds familiar.
yeah,
Too many epic untouched sites that they're just like, and that's mine, and that's mine, and that'll look nice on my wife, and that's mine.
exactly. And then where can we smuggle this to? I swear it's just a minuscule, non-important, piece of jewelry. It's like a giant golden, thing. But yeah.
I think it's one of the things. I think it's one of the things that ancient Egypt specifically that like people don't seem to understand is like how wide of a time period it takes up.
Yes.
So like more so than like Greece and Egypt, it would make sense, or Greece and Rome, it would make sense that like myths and legends and their religious rituals and burial practices and everything changes over time because it's a huge span of time that we just call like Egypt. Like I heard once, I don't know if it's true, but I heard once that like Egyptians had their own archaeologists for Egyptian history because it was like so old to them.
That, like, yeah, that's true. They had in the antiquity, the first archaeologist is like in ancient times. It was a princess that whose father funded, she was like royalty, and funded her to go do her digs and whatever she liked to do. And she's like basically also created the first museum as well. And there's also some sort of a saying too, where it's like Cleopatra is closest to us than she is the first pharaoh of Egypt. So like in the time lineage, so like that's how much time Egypt existed. So because now you think back to Cleopatra or somebody like that, and you're like, oh, thousands of years ago, it's antiquity, But even the duration of Egypt, she's closer to the modern world than she is to the beginning of Egypt. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that like when people are like, oh, but what do you mean like this has changed or that story is different? You're like, do you know how like this? We don't understand Cleopatra 100%. You think Cleopatra understood Pharaoh number 1 100%?
Yeah, for sure. That's another conversation for a rainy day, is the possible misnomers of her. She was a educated Macedonian woman who spoke like 7 or 8 languages, and instead they make her look like a overpriced prostitute, who paid for her country with her body. But maybe she did, maybe she didn't. I don't know. I wasn't there. No. But, yeah.
I think there's like so many topics in ancient Egypt that you could talk about that I feel like generally people only know the very surface level
Right.
stuff of.
Yeah. And oftentimes
So
they know the what the loudest person said. So sometimes it's wrong, you know. But
yeah, or like what the longest held belief has been, even if like
right.
that actually got debunked like 10 years ago, but because we believed it for 50 years, we still believe it.
Yeah, I can't forget it, right? But yeah.
So I think we could sit here all evening talking about ancient Egypt, but I'm sure as anyone watching the video can tell, it's getting very dark in my room right now because
Yeah.
it is very late at night. But before we go, is there anything else you feel like we haven't touched on that you feel like people should know?
I think that what people should know is that um educationally, this is going to tie back into education instead, is that educationally you and even in ancient times, oftentimes education is propagandized, whether it's to make ancient Egypt look great or the recent Caesar to be great. The things that you're taught in school, facts come and go, okay? And oftentimes they're agendized, but truth is eternal. So out there is truth. And it doesn't matter if all of society believes it. It doesn't matter if all of society hates it. It doesn't matter if everyone in society believes it. But outside of everything is unchangeable truth that no matter how many facts you find, no matter that are temporary or permanent, it is untouchable, whether you like it, believe it, or have discovered it yet. Gravity existed before Newton decided to talk about it. You know what I mean? And the laws of motion existed before Kepler was putting together his commentary. So out there is truth. And what I think is necessary is that people chase truth and not facts because now it's facts. Trust the science, trust the science. And then the science was wrong a few months ago. Now you have to trust the new science. Don't trust that science. You have to be a searcher for truth, and truth will not be unturned as new facts. And if anything, it's going to be confirmation. So, and that's, and also, the other thing that I see happening in America often, I don't know if it's happening now, is that where you are, but to look at history through the lens of what was happening at that time, you know, it may not be acceptable or practical now and through the modern lens or which is just, it's also a temporary lens as well. But truth is truth, and it will not be phased by the temporary, but also realize that all of history is temporary. And when you're looking in it, when you're begging the question to say, I want to have a snapshot of this ancient realm, right? Then you need to give them the dignity to gather it and review it against the ancient, what was happening, But also, obviously, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. So once you do that, you can't villainize somebody who at the time did something because that's what was going on at the time. You know what I mean? But then you also can learn from it and say, we see that there's nothing new under the sun. History almost seems cyclical. So when we see the dictators rising or the future fall of a civilization, we have access more than ever in history to all of the annals of history. And what are we doing with it? Are we squandering it? Are we using it as a tool to attack each other or to subdue somebody we don't like? Or are we using it for the better? I don't like to say the word enlightenment because it has attachment to it, other esoteric type of things. But really, I think that the ancients would have imagined that with this much free information around, that we would be more living in a time of peace and glory, and we're not. We have so much access where anybody can find anything, and instead we've used it to be more divisive and whatever. So anyway, that's the thing. Seek truth. Give them the dignity to live in the lens they lived in and learn from history.
Wow. I think those are very important parting words.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Dr. Bannworth, for being on the show. It's been a very interesting conversation. I'm sure my listeners have enjoyed hearing all the details of Egyptian funerary practices and the journey through the Duat. It's been great to have you.
For having me.
All right. And thank you, everyone, for listening. I will see you all next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.